Are your employees secretly resisting AI adoption? So, we're going to discover how understanding the quirks of psychology can transform the approach to integrating AI in your business. That's what I'm going to talk today with a behavioral economist, Melina Palmer.
Welcome to The AI-Powered Business Leader. This is the show that helps business leaders excel in the rapidly evolving environment of AI integration and implementation. We go beyond the hype to provide practical solutions for real businesses. Whether you're facing challenges like developing a clear AI strategy, upskilling your workforce, or ensuring data privacy and compliance, we've got you covered. Here is your host, Alistair McDermott.
And Melina, you're very welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, and I can see all of your books behind you on the bookshelf. You've written 3 books about behavioral economics, right?
Yes, I have.
Well, I'm really interested to chat about how that applies to AI and how teams are integrating or implementing AI. Because what we talked about before was we're seeing that a lot of people are kind of resisting it. And I'd like to just dig into that and understand that a bit more. Can you tell me how you think about that?
Sure. Well, just first a little bit about the brain and how it works, because that is the core of where behavioral economics comes from. So, our brains are actually kind of working in 2 systems all the time. I just refer to them as conscious and subconscious because that's easiest for people. And what research shows is that we humans make up to 35,000 decisions each every single day. So our brains are constantly going through all of these choices, but it can't be done on a conscious level, right? So we hear that number. And then if I say, how many decisions do you remember making yesterday? It's probably far less than, that 35,000. Often when I'm doing a talk, I'll hear people say 2 or 10, right? Like we don't remember many of those decisions because they have to be done on a subconscious level for us to actually be able to function and get through the day. So, the way that the subconscious is doing that, it needs to be using habits and predictability and rules of thumb to be making the bulk of those decisions. That means we have a very strong affinity for the status quo. We have things like familiarity bias. We like things the way that they are, and it's working in wanting things to be predictable so we don't have to include that conscious, slower processing into the mix. So, any change, including AI and technology, is going to be against kind of that predictability and status quo, the way we've always done things. And you layer in then this fear of, well, what's that going to mean about my job and all these other aspects of stress that's putting additional cognitive pressure. People are even more likely to be fearful and be rooted into that status quo.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I never heard that number before, 35,000 decisions, but that makes sense. And many of those are going to be tiny decisions. I know that I read before about, I think it was President Obama, where he spoke about having 2 colors of suits and he would just choose, gray suits one day and navy suits another day. If anybody has watched the videos of me podcasting over the last 200 or so episodes, they may think that I only actually have 2 t-shirts. I've got a whole bunch of exactly the same shirt that I just cycle between different colors of the same shirt. I even tried to be on brand with the colors, but just for convenience and just to have something there. And it was kind of in that same way. Okay, I don't really need to worry about what I'm wearing on the podcast, so I'm just always gonna go with one of those tech polo shirts that I have. That's kind of thinking about that consciously, I guess. So consciously thinking about a decision so that it then becomes like I've put a framework in place to bypass that decision in future.
Right. Yeah. So thinking about those things in advance, you have that habit and it's something you don't have to think about. Like you say, Steve Jobs, in addition to Obama, someone who we know wore the same, turtleneck and whatnot everywhere. So that wasn't a thing that had to be bogging down his brain in those processes, and you have more space to look at creative things. I love The Big Bang Theory, and there's an episode where Sheldon decides to let the dice decide, what he's going to eat and when he's going to get up and go to the bathroom. Like, he takes it way too far, as always happens. But truly, in that way, when you remove a lot of those extra decisions, it does free up cognitive space so you can be more open to things like change.
Yeah. So interesting. 35,000 decisions that we're making every day. We can hack it a little bit, like we just talked about. But this is why we're finding a lot of resistance to change. And there always has been resistance to change in every generation. There's been a new technology and new developments. One of the interesting things, though, is the sheer pace of disruption that we're seeing with the AI. With all of this new technology, it's very disruptive, and the pace it's changing, and even the tools themselves are increasing in the pace of change has increased, and they're changing rapidly all the time. Even people who work in AI find it difficult to keep up with all the changes. So how then does that map back to when we're trying to, say, get AI adoption across the board to help people be more productive and spend less time on tedious work, mundane work that we don't even like doing, but they're resisting that, which is kind of weird because
Right. When you can actually take a step back and you're looking at this objectively, when it's other people's roles and jobs and opportunities, it's so easy to see where the value is, right? And this is part of the problem that comes from the hiring or the manager who is communicating down to people to explain to them why this is good, and only looking at all of the positive stuff. So they're talking about that and not realizing the other person is absolutely freaking out at the idea that their job's going away, or where's the threat, or what does this mean to me, right? So the first concept from behavioral economics that I would tie in here is one of framing, which is that how you say something matters more than what you actually say. And so being thoughtful to how the other person is going to be receiving this information, and knowing that you want to present it in a way that is going to be the most likely to get them to want to buy in on that idea, that is where the bulk of your focus should be. And too often when we look at communication and change initiatives inside of organizations, it's just like, tell the team is one checkbox, and you just let everybody say this however they want. But that is where most things go wrong. So investing in that messaging is so, so important. An example of this from a different space here would be in the grocery store. Say you're needing to buy some hamburger, and you get there and they have two stacks that are almost identical, but one is listed as being 90% fat free and the other as 10% fat. Now, most people laugh when they hear this, right? And when we say, which one do you want to buy? Almost everybody around the world says they want the 90% fat free, right? 10% fat sounds terrible. And we're reminded about how we haven't been to the gym in a while and all this, right? So logically, we know it's exactly the same, but our brain doesn't necessarily hear it in the same way. And it can impact how we feel about that. So, in a business context, I once got an email from a boss on a Thursday morning at 10 a.m. I'd only been at this company for a couple of months, so I was still in a probationary period. And I got an email from her that said, "We need to talk, be in my office at 2." Now, this is a terrifying email to receive, right? And I, of course, spent 4 hours stressing about everything that was going to be happening, and looking at every project I was working on, every person I had been talking to, and like getting ready for whatever fight was ahead of me when I go into this meeting. And so 2 o'clock comes, and she gestures for me to sit down, and she says, "Hey, I'm going to be out of the office tomorrow and wanted to let you know that yours is the email I'm putting on my out of office responder." And
yeah, that's she went for the nuclear phrase of "we need to talk"
right. Yes. To
for something
which,
pretty minor. Yeah.
and I mean, so much stress on me. So one, imagine if she did want to tell me about any sort of change, right? Maybe it's saying, "Great news, we have this new system and AI that's going to help take over a bunch of responsibilities that you don't want to be dealing with. So this is good," right? I am not ready to hear that in that moment, right? My fight, flight, freeze is on high alert and my brain is way too stressed to be able to hear what's there. If that would have been slightly reframed, if that email, if she would have spent maybe 2 more minutes working on it and it would have said, "I'm gonna be out tomorrow. Do you have some time to talk about it at 2 o'clock?" I'm I'm ready to go, right? That's super easy. And so that time to be more thoughtful about the communication we're putting out into the world is so, so important. And for her, I know she was a great boss. I enjoyed working with her. I came to learn there was a specific meeting on Thursday mornings where this type of communication would come up. But I was always feeling like, what if, right? There's always this question there of if I actually did do something wrong, right? It's very stressful. And so when we think about how we're communicating, that's really key, and how much stress our teams are under when there's too many meetings and too many to-dos and tasks and projects and things. We're in a state of time pressure. It's like we're continually living in a space of that Ticketmaster countdown clock when you're going to buy tickets, right? And it's never taken you 20 minutes to type in your credit card number, but it feels so stressful in the moment because of that time pressure. And when we have too many meetings and emails and points of stress, you're doing the same for your employees. So focusing on giving them some cognitive bandwidth is going to make it so then when you frame and think about what would make them excited, where the value is for them in this opportunity, and having them be part of a conversation about AI, you can actually make it that they're more likely to be receptive to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think about this. So I go in and speak with teams, and so I'm talking to a managing director about coming in and talking to his team, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I just let everybody know." And I said, "Oh, okay. What did you tell them? Did you say I'm
Why?
bringing in an AI consultant to look at what you're doing?" That could really freak people out, and
Right.
we need to be very careful about this. And I know some people, I know some managing directors or CEOs who have brilliant communication skills, but I also know some who have come, like they might have a tech background like me. I'm a software engineer by trade. We don't, stereotypically we're not great communicators, and
Mhm.
so it can be a bit clunky. I know a lot of my peers who I went to college with and who I worked with at corporate software engineering roles. They wouldn't have been very comfortable, talking to other human beings ever. That's so I just imagine people having these conversations and not really being aware of how what they're saying could be perceived. I think what you said is really interesting, and I think it actually may be rejected by some people, that how you say it is more important than what you say, because surely, like, that's not logical. Like, what you're saying is the most important thing, but this is human psychology, right?
Yes, yeah, and that's really the basis of all of behavioral economics. And I've got 3 books for you to read if you want to hear some more about some of that. But I mean, even in that case, like I said, with the email from my boss, right, where you can feel the stress of and thinking about if you got that email, what that would mean for you, and knowing that all she really wanted to say was actually what she thought was a good thing, right, a positive, to say that she was trusting for me to be the like receiver of those emails. That was actually she wanted to talk to me about it because it was, this very small sort of like honor in the workplace, right? That I was being trusted to be the person while she was out of the office. But it was totally lost in the way that that email was sent and just a couple of words. And now I know too, like you're, many in the audience and that we're talking about, it's easy to say, well, those things shouldn't matter. People know what we're trying to say, and logically they should be able to read through the lines. They should just know, they'll figure it out, that's on them. And I'm here to tell you that's just not how it works, right? We are, because of those 35,000 daily decisions, the way we're constantly taking in a stream of information, the way you communicate is impacting the way people are going to be interacting with you constantly. It absolutely is. And even if you don't think it should matter, because it does, it's worth putting a little bit of thought into. Even, the way that you put things on a list for choices for people will impact which one they're most likely to choose. And so if you don't think about it and you just throw them out alphabetically or reverse alphabetically or whatnot, people may choose a thing that is not the best option because of how you presented that to them. And so being a little bit more thoughtful in how you frame that, taking just a couple of extra minutes can make a huge difference into whether people are naturally buying in on ideas or they're ruffling feathers all over the place and not interested in what it is that you're sharing. So as you look to communicate about something like AI, I highly recommend having a more open-ended conversation and as early as you can in the process. So instead of like telling people this is happening, get on board, right? Which seldom goes over very well. We can instead say, hey, like, I know we've all been feeling stressed and, overworked. There's a lot of stuff happening all the time. When you look at your role, what are the things that you're most excited that you love doing? And what are some of the things that you kind of wish you could delegate away? Like, what's some of the extra stuff that feels a bit like mundane and that you don't love, like maybe responding to these types of emails, or you can kind of nudge in the direction of where you're hoping that AI is going to go to give them some ideas. And then if people say, oh yeah, I hate responding to this first pass on things, or I really wish I didn't have to do this thing in my scheduling, or it would be great if I didn't have to write the first draft of something because I hate doing that, you can say, well, there's actually a tool we've been looking at that might be able to fix this solution for you and free up your time to do more of this other thing that you said that you love. Would you like that? Right. So it's them being a part of it. That's the IKEA effect in action. And they have this opportunity to build out how their role can be more enjoyable. They have more time and freedom. And because we framed it in a way that they're helping to shape it and how to use it, then it just opens the door a little bit to try and to test and have some space because they see a benefit that's there. And then once they get comfortable, then you can try the next thing and the next thing.
How would you speak with people about the fears around their job? Because I know that that's one that people, it's the first place people go with that
Mhm.
fight or flight reflex.
Yeah, well, I think in that way of kind of asking the question about the space that you might have and the opportunities that exist to alleviate some of the stuff that you aren't enjoying doing right now anyway, but that you can have space for the things that you really, really love. And if you're able to talk with people about the, making space for the things that human brains should be working on, right? We want our human brains to be creative, to be able to have space to think more broadly about projects and to do something that you uniquely can be working on for us. And when you have the space, this is an opportunity to really leverage why you're here and to showcase your talents. And so I think if you talk to someone in that way about the value that they create and knowing that this is going to help them be their best selves here for the organization and have more capacity and things, that can alleviate some of the fears. Whereas if you come in and say, hey, I know you guys are thinking probably like, what about my job? And I get you're worried about that. And, maybe we've seen over here, people are losing jobs and over there, but, we're going to do what we can so that, hopefully that won't be an issue around here. So let's talk about AI, right? Like, ugh, right? Nobody wants to have that conversation. So that's framing again, right? Of how we
Hmm.
say it really mattering. And when I think about internal communication, especially, I like to think about this scent of popcorn, right? So when we have freshly popped delicious popcorn. You walk by a movie theater or something, it's all over, it's pulling you in, you're excited, right? It's getting us set up that we want to be a part of this. We've all been in the office when someone burns a bag of popcorn, and it's like all anyone can talk about for the rest of the day. And maybe even like a week later, that smell is just lingering, right? And you go, "Oh, is that Melina again? She reheated salmon and broccoli last week. Like she's the worst," right? It just all we can think and talk about is this smell, right, of that burnt popcorn. It's impacting everything. So with your communication, you can read the email, you can think about what you plan to say and say, "Hey, is this going to come off like burnt popcorn?" Because it's really hard to unburn the bag of popcorn, right? And it's going to be there for a long time. If we instead say, "How can I make this a little bit more enticing?" Right? How can I be more drawing people in than repelling them with that burnt popcorn? That's something that you can be keeping top of mind to help have more thoughtful communication.
Yeah, I like that analogy. That's very visceral. I think everybody knows what that what that's like. Um,
Yes.
what one other thing that I encounter, and it's when I'm talking to people, employees about AI. One of the things that everybody who's dealing with AI is dealing with right now is the fact that we don't know exactly how we can use it. We haven't figured out all the use cases. We don't know what all the capabilities are, even of the systems. Even the people building these AI systems don't know what all the capabilities are, how they work exactly. Even, there's all sorts of strange foibles. Like if you tell it to take a deep breath and pause before it starts doing something, you can get better results. And they don't really understand why that is. There's just some crazy stuff about like little things that you can learn as you go along with this. But it's really important to encourage testing and experimentation. And that's one thing I get a bit of pushback on, because it's like, can you just tell me how to use it? Okay, I see I need to use this. Can you just tell me how to use it? I don't really want to waste my time experimenting. I don't want to be experimenting. Um, can you just talk about the psychology of that a little bit, and how we
Mm.
might be able to encourage people to experiment and test a little bit more? There are always people who do want to do that, the tinkerers, the people who are happy to play with things, but there are many people who don't want to do that.
Yeah. So I love the, take a deep breath piece. That's really fascinating. That's bizarre in all the ways, but
And that's
appreciate
based on
that.
research, by the way. This has been
Yeah.
shown to be the case. This is peer approved research. That's not just
Super.
yeah.
It's
So
cool
it is
and
it's
surprising.
very cool, but also very strange.
Right. Yes. And we can see why um I mean, it's kind of even rooted in our own brains, right? And so take that same advice and think about how we might have the conversation with someone if we're saying, "Hey, going to the human side of research here too." There was some work that I know someone did with a call center where people it was a banking call center and people needed to know their passcode, which is not, and it's like a weird phrase or a word or something that isn't the same as like whatever your 4-digit pin is that you usually use. And so when the in the call center, they were telling people, well, and you better get it right, because if you don't, it's gonna lock your account for 5 days or something. And people would then get it wrong, and you have to go because they're so stressed, their brains like over flooded with these emotions and fears and chemicals and things going on. And it actually created a lot of extra work for the financial institution because then you're having to refer to different departments and do all of this. So the project was about reducing call center times. And what they ended up doing is when people would ask for this, they would tell them to slow down, like take a minute. I've got all the time that you need. Like, don't worry, just take your time, let us know what that is when you have something. And more people, when you gave them that little moment of just slow down, think about it, they gave better responses, and call times actually went down when you told people to take longer when they worked on stuff, right?
That's
So
so counterintuitive. I love it.
right. And it's the same as you think about those teams and the stress and things that we're feeling as you're looking to have some opportunity for them. So, I mean, to me, as a, you know, I can see both sides of this, right? Where we want to just know how it will work, but context is so important, right? And so I think for one, you could say, and I think there's some nuance to this again, but on the one side of like, but the human part of this is you, right? Like your role is different than everything that exists, and so we need your input to help this to be the best value for what your area of expertise is, right? So if the AI could just do it all, that would be a problem, right? I think when we get to that, that's getting a little bit close to causing people to fear for a job. But if someone's really rebelling and like maybe we want to test in that sort of space with the right person in the right context and all of those aspects. But I think truly, finding if there's a right kind of a metaphor or the opportunity that works as you're thinking for someone to be able to play around with it, and to know, I use in my books, I talk about a framework, behavioral baking, right? To where we're going to follow a recipe at some point, and like the first thing you're going to bake, you're probably using like a box cake mix because you want to be as simple as possible. So there's probably something you want to start with to get people to where they can do something real easy. That's the like toe in the water as we're just starting to learn and we're making those first cakes. We're using the box with the least amount of stuff as possible. And then as they get comfortable, then they could start to experiment with some stuff. But to jump in and say, and I need you to figure this out and think what you could test and what are all the options and everything we can do. Our brains get so overwhelmed with that that we can't jump in. We have a paradox of choice problem that happens here too. When we feel too much stress, we don't want to make any sort of decision. So if instead you were to limit and say, as a first step into using AI, we've found that most people like to use it for A or B as a starting point. And here are some prompts that can get you started. Which one would you feel like would be the most helpful for you in your day to day to free you up for other more important work?
Yeah,
And say,
yeah.
oh,
There's
okay, I can make a choice.
there is actually a process that I go through. So I see three different types of prompts that people can use typically. One is a simple prompt, and a simple prompt is something really straightforward, like what is the capital of France? So it's something really straightforward. Next step would be conversational prompting, and this is where you have a conversation and give information. And actually, I like doing this with dictation. Some people don't like dictation, but I use dictation a lot for these. Because basically, what you can do is you can do like you can just do a monologue for a minute or two about the
Hmm.
situation, about the problem that you're trying to solve, and tell the AI, here's all the things that you might need. And that's conversational prompting. And then the third type of prompting is structured prompting, and that's where it's like those are the prompts where you see people say, "Oh, we're selling a pack of 10,000 different prompts that will do all these things." They're typically very formulaic, structured prompts, and so that's kind of like the next level. Again, structured prompts are really useful because you can get repeated, you can use them over and over again and get the same types of output, which you don't tend to with the other types of prompts. um, but it's kind of like the more advanced version. So
Yeah.
that's the way I approach this when I'm talking to people, is trying to say, look, start out with really simple stuff. Once you get the hang of simple stuff, just go into conversational mode and just chat with it, either through text typing like a chat bot, or you can actually speak to it. And I demo the voice app. You can actually have a conversation, like a back and forth conversation, which is a little bit weird, but you can do that too. But I don't like doing that one. I just have where I monologue into the voice recording for 2 minutes and explain a situation, and then it gives me back a pretty decent answer. And then for those who want to go into, we want to process this type of input and always get this type of output, that's where you want to use a structured prompt, and that's where that's really useful. So that's how I would approach this. So I think based on what you said there, if we can get people to through those first two stages, then when we get to stage three, that's when we can start to talk about experimenting and learning and playing around a bit more with what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I think too, as we were just kind of talking through this, I had thought that, I mean, really, if we take a step back and we think about what drives human behavior, there's a lot of research, of course, in human motivation, intrinsic, extrinsic, as we look at being, we're competitive. We like to master things. We're trying to defend ourselves and our teams. We want to bond with other people. We're looking to achieve different areas. And so, with that, if we were to take a step back and say, what if we get out of their typical role? Because really, if the problem is not about specifically them just doing this for their job per se, but we want them to be thinking about and just having some exposure to what sort of cool things they can be doing with AI, and test in a really safe space that has nothing to do with their actual job, right? So if you were going to put together some sort of a competition of who could get the AI to write the best short story, or if you want to use it to create the best subject line of something, or you're going to use it to do the most interesting blog post or whatever, right? If you were going to do something that was separate from whatever's in their actual role and make it into a game, whether they're going to be competing individually or otherwise. And then it turns it into something fun, and you get to play around with it, that everybody's got, an hour to do the best whatever it is, and they get to try that out, and then the winner gets something, right? And the prize one, everybody loves PTO, right? So being able to say somebody gets a day off if they have the best one or something is a thing that people are very much motivated by. But it could be, even the simple, like, pizza parties or whatever else you want to give people. There are things, or just bragging rights. You get the trophy and then you do one each week and it moves around the office and people get to have it in their, or it's like a special background you get to use in all the meetings to show that you were the best one, right? So being able to have that prestige amongst others, that you're the best at this thing. And then everyone wants to get better at using the tool, and they're able to then start incorporating that into their job. So when we think about that human behavioral aspect of anything in work and life, if we take a step back and think about what drives us, what motivates us, how we're getting those actions, and thinking about small little things that may feel unrelated but can actually get us really excited about things. And even if we would never admit that we care about the cool Zoom background or the little tiny trophy behind us, we do. And it may get people to try something, because I don't have time to be worried about learning the thing because I'm too excited about winning the bragging rights, right?
I love it, and you just reminded me, like, the whole thing about gamification. Like, we could get into to talk. I don't think we have time to talk about that, but I do want to touch on it a little bit because I think it's really interesting. But I want to just see, can I summarize or encapsulate what you've said? I think that if I listen to everything that you've said so far, really what you're saying is reduce stress,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what it all boils down to. The email example that you gave earlier on, the way that we approach talking to people about AI, communicating around that, it's all about removing the potential stress from the situation.
For sure. Well, and a lot of the benefit that we're looking to get from AI is to reduce stress from people as well. But we may need to do a little bit of work up front to help create the space for them to be open to this. Some of the stats I like to give that are in my book, What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You, are that, because I know people are going to say, like, hey, I get that it's only 2 minutes or 5 minutes on an email, but when I have so many of them and I'm already working long hours, I don't have the time, right? So research has found that 50% of emails are misunderstood, for one, right? So we're going too fast. We're trying to just throw something out. And half of the time, people don't know what you're talking about, right? So that then makes it to where actually 17 hours per person per week is said to be spent clarifying something that was previously said. 17 hours per person per week clarifying something that was previously said. So we're coming by with a quick, like, do you have
That
5 minutes?
is nuts.
Send the Slack chat. And, oh, are you sending the agenda or am I? And when did you want that, in this time zone or in theirs? so much junk because we weren't thoughtful enough on the front end. And because of that, then somewhere between 62, 68% of emails are unimportant, which many of us feel that burden all the time, right? So if you think about sending, not every email has to be the greatest thing that's ever been sent, right? But if we think about, if you could only reach out to people once a day, how might your communication change? How would you be more thoughtful in the way that you were going to connect with them? If you were going to try to just do one email better today and see what happens, or reduce one meeting and get rid of it and freeing up a little bit of space, very quickly, you could be saving, we'll just say like 2 hours per person per week. That's huge, right? When we think about it. So a little bit of thoughtfulness can go a long way in creating that cognitive space. And then, AI can help as we go to make even more room for people.
Yeah, and that's one of the real powers is taking away a lot of the mundane, tedious stuff, because that's what I like to do is set these systems up so they can do that, because then people have more free time to work on stuff they actually like doing,
Mhm.
which is what we're really trying to get to here. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that we should explore a bit more in the few minutes that we have left?
I think the last concept that really clearly comes to mind for me here is to remember that we humans are a herding species, like sheep and cows and guppies. And so knowing that other people like us like this and are seeing value is something where we can be leveraging social proof. So that's, testimonials and star ratings and reviews and things like that are in that category of social proof. But if a friend or a trusted colleague really likes the thing, or we're able to say, hey, over here, people in this same role have said that it helped, using AI helped them to X, Y, or Z, and they're available to talk with you, or something that helps people to feel safe because other people like them have done it before and given it a stamp of approval, is really valuable in getting that buy-in and for people feeling okay about taking that next step. And so sometimes those testimonials, can even say, I was really worried at first. I was kind of skeptical. I was concerned about my own job. But once I jumped in, I saw how great and amazing this was. And I was able to get through my work faster, and I have better work life balance, and I even got a promotion or whatever, right? Like those stories exist, I'm sure. And so if we're able to show where someone says, hey, I feel worried, I want a promotion, I want more time, maybe I should try it, right? Because Susie Q over at this other department got this value, and maybe I could see that benefit as well. So making sure that you're lining up the herd of what you want people to do is really key. So we don't want to say things like, I know most of you probably hate the idea of AI and are feeling really scared about what this can do, but right? So like we've totally lumped in a herd of like, okay, I should be scared and hate this thing, right? Versus if we can look to, you know, 90% of people that have embraced and started using AI have said that it's helped them to up. And we want that for you too. So let's join the group, right? Everyone's doing this. So you should too. You don't want to fall behind. People have a fear of missing out too. That loss aversion is there. So yeah, that herding and social proof is key too.
I love that. And I did open a loop about gamification, so I'm going to close that as well.
Mm.
Can I just ask you to briefly explain why gamification works? Because like I've seen it, in apps that I'm using and various different places, and like you talked about earlier about having a prize for people doing stuff. Why does gamification work so well?
Yes. Well, there are many things that go into different aspects of gamification. Some of it, like I was saying, in our own motivation. But one thing that I'll point out here is like the brain chemical dopamine being a really key one, which ties in with anticipation and whether or not we're going to get the thing in time, if we might be able to, like, oh, maybe, right? We're so excited to see if it's going to work out and we can get the thing in the right number of moves or whatnot, right? And that anticipation of will it or will it not work out, and I want to be able to try, is a really key piece to things like gamification. Also, in that herding aspect and that social proof. There is some prestige that can come when you're able to see that you're beating other people, or when you can see that you're just under a threshold of being able to pass somebody else and get into a top 10 or whatever that happens to be. So there are a lot of different aspects that come into play there. But when we think about anytime you look at these sorts of things and you wonder, like, why do I even care about the getting this, Duolingo is a real master of gamification on things. So being able to see all the
Brilliant
things they're
example. Yeah.
doing of the where things are falling on a chart and you're just below the line, and more people like you are doing this, and you got the badge for doing this in the morning, you get the special app icon, which again go, okay, right, no one sees that but me, but I know it, I want to keep my streak going, right? We don't want to miss out on that streak. And we'll wake up almost like middle of the night and go, oh no, I need to do this before it goes away, right? So scarcity, there's a lot of cool stuff going on within that, but those are just a couple of the pieces of why gamification can work.
Yeah, Strava is another example of that, where
Mm.
you're competing with people, and you do your cycle, and it puts it in. It tells you, you're one of the local leaders or local legends or one of these things. So another. Okay, we're at time, so I just want to say thank you so much, Melina. You have three books: the truth about pricing, what your customer wants and can't tell you, and what your employees need and can't tell you. And I think that everybody who is listening to this or watching this should go check that out straight away. You can find Melina on thebrainybusiness.com. And I just want to mention, I got today or yesterday, actually, in the post, a copy of the author proof of my new book, which is the AI powered thought leader: how to become an indispensable voice in a world of intelligent machines. So that's going to be for sale on Amazon, hopefully around the start of August. So if you're interested, go check that out. So Melina, thank you so much for taking the time and chatting to me about all of these really interesting kind of psychological hacks and things to think about for us as we kind of try and figure out this whole world of AI.
Of course, thanks for having me, it was really fun.
Is there anywhere else people should check you out? I know you've got a podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast is also The Brainy Business, and you can find that and the books and things about consulting or speaking at thebrainybusiness.com. And you can find me on all the socials as The Brainy Biz, BIZ, as well as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Melina, thank you so much.